The phone buzzed, a sharp, intrusive vibration against the quiet hum of the evening. It was 9:12 p.m. Nina. The screen glowed with 15 stark words, "I'm not your property. Stop calling me." No prelude. No argument. Just this, dropped into the silent expanse of a Tuesday night when she hadn't come home, hadn't called, hadn't sent even a fleeting text to acknowledge her absence. I'd called twice, texted once, more confused than worried at 7 p.m., than simply waiting. Now this. I stared at the message, the words themselves clear enough. It was the tone that caught me, a familiar, chilling contempt that had the power to twist my concern into a flaw, my perfectly reasonable inquiries into an aggressive trespass. That tone had shadowed more moments in our 3 years together than I cared to admit. But this time, something within me shifted. Not dramatically, not with a sudden snap, but like a deeply embedded gear, grinding for years, finally slipping into a new, unexpected position. Understood, I typed back, the words forming with a detached clarity that surprised even me. I'm not your boyfriend anymore. Don't come home. Then I changed the locks. The apartment lease bore only my name. Every utility bill, every payment, linked solely to me. Nina had lived here, yes, as my partner, but never as a tenant with any legal claim. Her message had been a declaration of independence, a stark rejection of possession. By changing the locks, I was simply taking her at her word, honoring her stated position with an equally unambiguous act. After the click of the final lock, I placed my phone face down on the kitchen counter. No furious follow-up message, no dramatic gesture. Just quiet. I made dinner. I watched some TV. I went to bed early. For 3 hours, my world was completely silent. That quiet was an alien thing. For so long, I'd lived in a low-grade conflict, a constant hum of managing another person's moods, tracking my words, anticipating the next cold front. I'd forgotten what the absence of it felt like. Making dinner, not checking my phone every few minutes, not mentally replaying every conversation to pinpoint a potential offense, it felt like the first full breath I'd taken in months. It was then, in that sudden, profound stillness, that I understood a terrible truth. Some of what I'd convinced myself was love had, for a long time, been nothing more than tension. I'd grown so accustomed to its presence, I'd stopped noticing it was there at all. Then the calls began. Missed call. Missed call. Voicemail. 2 more missed calls. My phone, still face down, vibrated with a frantic energy. I didn't answer. I could map the arc of her response without needing to hear her voice, initial anger, then disbelief, then the inevitable, softer pivot once the aggression failed to yield results. Nina, like most people facing unexpected resistance, had her patterns. Around 1 a.m., a pounding on the front door. Controlled, not yet desperate, the kind of knock that still believed it could command an opening. "Cole, open up," she called, her voice muffled but distinct. I don't want to do this in the hallway. I didn't move. The doorknob rattled a few times. Then I heard the soft thud of her heels being kicked off. Her voice came through the door again, lower, tighter. "You're being insane. We had a fight. Adults don't do this." A fight. That was her framing. But we hadn't had a fight. She'd sent a message, I'd accepted its terms. A fight implies mutual disagreement, a desire for resolution. This was one person making a declaration, and another person choosing, for the first time, to honor it fully. Her insistence on calling it a fight was a desperate attempt to reframe the situation as something mutual, something requiring a mutual resolution. I wouldn't allow it. The insults followed, familiar accusations, controlling, insecure. This, she claimed, was precisely why she'd needed space. I leaned against the kitchen counter, and to my surprise, felt a profound calm. Not a manufactured calm, but the kind that settles when you finally stop arguing with a truth you've long known. Every word she uttered through that door was confirming something I'd been filing away for months without allowing myself to directly examine. The accusations of control, of insecurity, I'd heard them before, in smaller doses, whenever I'd dared to push back. They were her default when other options ran out. Hearing them now, in this context, was an unexpected and powerful clarification. Around 1:18 a.m., her tone shifted. Her voice softened. She didn't have her charger, she said. Her things were inside. I watched my phone on the counter light up with another missed call, then settle back into silence. At 1:34, I heard her slide down the door, the soft, protracted drag of fabric against wood. Then, quieter still, I didn't mean it like that. You know I didn't. That sentence. That exact sentence had followed every line she'd ever crossed, every disappearing act, every dismissal, every time she'd made me feel like my reaction was the real problem. I didn't mean it like that, she'd always say, just late enough to cool things down, but never early enough to change anything. It was a reset button disguised as an apology. For the first time, I didn't respond. I slept on the couch that night, not out of sadness, but because it felt like neutral ground I was only just beginning to claim. The next morning, my phone displayed 37 missed calls. I made coffee. I listened to the voicemails while standing at the kitchen counter. To sit, I felt, would lend them too much weight. The first two were pure rage. The next three, disbelief, the tone of someone who still thought I was bluffing. By the sixth message, her voice had dropped, slowed. She didn't know where she was supposed to go, she pleaded. I couldn't just lock her out. A version of me, not even very long ago, would have opened that door. That version would have convinced himself she was scared, hurting, in need. He would have rationalized that showing up in such a moment was compassion. But I knew now it would have been just another rotation of the same wheel, with me absorbing the same cost, both of us pretending it was something else. That old version of me almost worked its way in again. Almost. I heard her say, I don't know where I'm supposed to go. But I knew, with a sudden, chilling certainty, that she'd had a somewhere, a plan for the evening when she chose not to come home. Her confusion wasn't about being trapped, but about me unexpectedly removing her safety net. She hadn't anticipated me letting her stay gone. At 8:46 a.m., a knock came. Different energy this time. Polite, almost practiced. The version of Nina that appeared when anger wouldn't serve her purpose. I opened the door on the chain. She looked rough, makeup smudged, hair pulled back, wearing one of my hoodies. Seeing me, she straightened. The soft approach lasted seconds. So, you're really doing this? Her jaw tightened. You think you can just erase me overnight? I didn't erase you, I told her, my voice even. You drew the line. She scoffed, claimed her text was about boundaries, that I was twisting her words. It was about disrespect, I countered, nothing more complicated. Her eyes slid past me into the apartment. I live here, she insisted. You lived here, I corrected, with me. She crossed her arms, accusing me of abuse. The word. She reached for it like a default, an automatic weapon deployed when a conversation became uncomfortable. I calmly stated I hadn't touched her, threatened her, or chased her down. I had, in fact, done exactly what she asked. That wasn't what I meant, she said. You wanted power without consequences, I stated. Her face flushed. You don't get to decide that, she snapped. Through the narrow gap in the door, I met her gaze. I already did. The anger drained from her face almost instantly. Her eyes went glassy. I just needed one night without you calling me, she said softly. I didn't think you'd do something so extreme. That's the problem, I replied, the words landing with a surprising weight. You never think I will. She searched my face, looking for the old me, the one who could be talked down, whose discomfort outweighed the situation. He wasn't there. The recognition of that truth flickered across her features. She tried other angles, I was throwing her out like she was nothing. She'd only needed one night, as if I was the one who had altered our dynamic. I reminded her of her actual words, "I'm not your property. Stop calling me, not I need some space tonight." She rolled her eyes, calling me too literal. "That was always the issue," I said. "It was always about what you meant, never what you actually said." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Open it. We'll talk inside. You're embarrassing yourself out here. Image management. Even now." "I'm not opening the door," I stated. "We can arrange a time for your things, with someone else present." Her expression shifted again, completely. "So, this is punishment," she accused, "because I didn't check in like a good girlfriend." "No," I said. "This is me listening." That landed strangely. She stared. "You don't get to just end things by text." "You ended them by text," I replied. "I just confirmed it." Her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced at the screen, then back at me. "Where am I supposed to go?" The performance dropped for a fleeting second, her voice raw. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But that stopped being my responsibility the moment you decided I wasn't allowed to care." Her mouth opened, then closed. There was genuine fear in her eyes, not grief for us, but fear about logistics, about the gap between her assumed standing and her actual reality. She spent several more minutes trying various angles, from "you're being dramatic" to "this affects both of us," to the soft, reasonable tone again. None of it worked because none of it was about fixing anything. She wasn't trying to repair. She was trying to undo. And the guy on the other side of the door, the one she was talking to, wasn't home anymore. "You're going to regret this," she said finally, her voice hard. "Maybe," I told her. But the regret I had staying finally outweighed the fear of leaving. That balance doesn't tip back. She left a few minutes later. Through the peephole, I watched her pace the parking lot, phone to her ear, gesturing back at the building. I didn't need to hear her words. Her movements already branded me the controlling one, the unstable one, the guy who'd blown everything up over nothing. Too literal. I heard her say it again in my mind. She wanted to send a message designed to sting, then call my reaction unreasonable. That playbook only worked on someone still afraid of losing her. The moment that fear was gone, the move had nothing to grip. Once I stopped being afraid of losing something, the entire game board disappeared. Around noon, texts started coming in from other numbers. Her mother, warning me about legalities. Her friend Brooke, saying I was proving Nina's need for space. I replied to none of them. There was genuinely nothing to say. Any response would be ammunition. Silence was my only defense. An hour later, Nina texted again, a completely different message. No accusations, no blame, just logistics. She was exhausted, hadn't slept, just needed clothes and her laptop. Carefully written, stripped down, reasonable. "We can arrange a time later with someone else present," I replied. Her typing bubble appeared, vanished, reappeared. "So, you don't trust me now?" Trust wasn't the issue. Trust required good faith, and what we'd had was a consistent, 3-year pattern. I was finally choosing to trust the pattern, not the promises. "Not promises," I typed back. That was my last message that afternoon. By mid-afternoon, she reappeared. Brooke was a few steps behind her, arms crossed, face set with the conviction of someone who'd heard one side of the story. Nina knocked softly, performing reasonableness. She said through the door they could all talk like adults. Brooke added I was making things worse. I spoke loudly enough to be heard clearly. "I'm not escalating anything. I'm ending it." Nina's voice cracked. "After everything I put up with from you." That sentence settled everything. Not with anger, but with absolute clarity. She wasn't devastated about losing us. She was upset about losing the apartment, the stability, the version of me who always eventually backed down. Once I saw that, there was no urgency left in any of it. After everything I put up with from you, she disappeared without a word, sent that text, demanded entry, brought backup, and she was the one who put up with things? That was pure gymnastic deflection. But I didn't argue. I didn't take the bait. My non-reaction made the next 24 hours what they were. That night, the apartment was the quietest it had been in over a year. No footsteps, no cabinet doors slammed, no undercurrent of something unresolved. Just the refrigerator humming and my phone lighting up every 10 minutes, testing my resolve. I hadn't changed my mind. I answered no calls. At 9:42 p.m., a voicemail made me sit down. Her voice shook. She didn't understand how I could be so cold, how I could shut her out like she meant nothing. She loved me. This, in its own way, was the most honest thing she'd said. Not because it was truly about love, but because for her, love and access had always been synonymous. Availability. Compliance. My constant presence, regardless of her actions. Cutting that off, in her logic, made me the cold one. I sat there, replaying every time I'd been labeled too much for wanting basic communication, too needy for checking in, too insecure for expecting an acknowledgement of her existence. Now, I was heartless for stopping. The framing always ran in one direction, always at my expense. Around 11 p.m., a different knock. Frantic. "Cole, please." Her voice through the door, shaking. "I'll say whatever you want. Just let me in." That stopped me. Not "let's fix this," or "I want to talk it through." Say whatever you want. She'd abandoned the pretense of repair. She just needed the door to open. "I'm not opening the door," I said. A long pause. Then, anger broke through again, louder, less contained. "She called me a hero." "I just finally listened to you," I told her. She sobbed against the door, a deep, wrenching cry. For a second, the old wiring tried to fire, the part of me that believed her pain always outweighed mine. But I saw it clearly now. Opening that door wouldn't be compassion. It would be choosing the same cycle, one more time. "I hope you're safe tonight," I said. "But we're done." The crying stopped almost immediately. That told me everything I still needed to know. The moment the door became a truly closed option, the sobbing ceased. Not gradually, but instantly. It wasn't grief. It was strategy, hitting a wall and shutting off. That was the moment it became simple for me. The next morning, an email. Nina, who hated email, too permanent, too easy to screenshot, too much of a paper trail, had pivoted. Text hadn't worked, calls hadn't worked, showing up hadn't worked. So, she tried to reframe the entire situation as something reasonable, in writing. The email was long, carefully crafted. She felt unsafe, blindsided, called it emotional abandonment, used the word trauma twice. At the end, she implied she might involve someone if I remained uncooperative. That last part kindled a quiet anger in me. Not loud, but focused. The clean anger that pares everything down to its core. I replied with 3 sentences. "You told me to stop calling you." "I did." "You said you weren't my property." "I agreed." "We can coordinate pickup of your belongings through a third party." Nothing else. 10 minutes later, an unknown number called. I didn't pick up. Another call. Then a text from her sister, asking what was wrong with me. I blocked the number. By early afternoon, she showed up alone. No Brooke. Just her, in the hallway, red eyes, shaking hands. She asked for her laptop through the door, said she had work to do. This was the first request entirely without angle. Pure logistics. I told her to step back, retrieve the laptop, and slid it through the opening. Our fingers didn't touch. She looked at me in a way I hadn't seen through any of this, like she was truly seeing for the first time. "You're really not coming back from this, are you?" she asked. I shook my head. "Neither are you." She started to speak, then stopped. Her shoulders dropped, not dramatically, just went slack. And that was the moment the argument actually ended. Not with a bang, but with a question, a headshake, and something between us quietly closing. The apartment still didn't feel entirely mine after she left. It felt like everything in it was waiting for me to make a mistake. I spent that evening packing her things methodically. Clothes folded, shoes paired, toiletries sealed. In 3 years, there were drawers I hadn't opened, shelves I'd left untouched for her arrangements. It was strange to realize how much of my own space I'd quietly carved myself out of. It had just become the layout of my life, the shape of keeping the peace. Small things hit harder than I expected: a grocery list in her handwriting, a mug she'd claimed as hers, 2 throw pillows she'd bought. None were a big deal individually, but their sum was something else entirely. 3 years of small adjustments, small concessions, small spaces I'd quietly stopped inhabiting because she'd taken them up, and it was easier not to negotiate. I looked at the stack of boxes and thought about how much lighter the apartment was going to feel, and how strange it was that I hadn't realized how heavy it had gotten. Around 8 p.m., a text came from a new number. "Her again." "Not angry," she said, "just wanted to understand how things had come to this." An hour later, a FaceTime request. Declined. Then the longest message she'd sent, paragraphs of apology woven with deflection. She'd been overwhelmed that night. I took things too literally. She never thought I would actually leave. That last line lingered. She never thought I'd leave. I turned it over, sitting in the quiet of the apartment, her boxes stacked against the wall. How safe she'd felt, how confident that no matter what she said, no matter how many times she'd pulled back or cut me off or made me feel like basic care was an imposition, I'd still be there. Still calling. Still keeping the lights on. Still making it easier for her to do it again the next time something got inconvenient. I thought about how long that had been the shape of us, how gradually it had become normal. How I'd kept filing things away without looking directly at them, because looking meant either a real conversation or admitting I wasn't going to have one. So I'd done neither. Just stayed. Let the pile get bigger. Told myself every relationship had friction, and this was just part of the deal. That was a lie. Not all friction is normal. Some of it is just one person absorbing the cost of another person's choices, over and over, and calling it compromise. I typed a response, deleted it. Typed again, deleted that. Finally, one line, I meant what I said. "Please stop contacting me." Her typing bubble appeared, held, disappeared. Then, nothing. For the first time since that Tuesday night, there were no calls, no knocks, no unknown numbers, no emails. Just quiet. And sitting in that quiet, what I felt wasn't sadness or triumph. It was relief. The specific kind that comes when something you've been bracing against for a long time finally stops requiring your attention. She never thought I'd leave. She had placed me in the category of permanent fixture, so long ago she stopped registering my patience as an act of choice. She thought it was just how I was built. The problem with counting on someone's patience like it has no end is that they don't send a warning shot. They just stop. And when they do, it doesn't look like anger. It looks like silence. The quiet didn't hold forever. 2 days later, my building manager knocked. Awkward, armed with a prepared sentence. Nina, he said, had contacted him, claiming she'd been unexpectedly locked out, needing access to essential belongings. He wanted to know if there was a misunderstanding. I didn't raise my voice. I explained we'd broken up, the lease was in my name, and I was coordinating her belongings through a neutral third party. Then I showed him the text she'd sent. He read it, nodded slowly, and made a note. That was the end of that conversation. That afternoon, a handwritten note slid under my door. She never thought I'd abandon her. She was hurt, confused, had only wanted reassurance, not consequences. It ended, "I still believe we can fix this if you stop being stubborn." I read it once, then that last sentence clicked. She wasn't asking for repair. She was asking for reversal. She wanted the old me, the one who'd hear "stop calling me" and panic, then apologize for calling. The one who'd eventually open the door, regardless of how he'd been treated, because the discomfort of staying was still less than the fear of being truly done. The one who'd reset everything at the first sign of softness, because being chosen, even conditionally, felt better than being nothing. That version of me had kept this running for too long. He was gone now. And the note made it clear she hadn't gotten that memo. I folded the note, put it in a drawer. Then I finished boxing everything she'd left. Every item labeled, neutrally, no commentary. Clothes, shoes, the random things I'd stopped noticing were hers. When I was done, I looked at the space she'd occupied and saw how much of it I'd never actually used. Entire drawers, a corner of the closet, half the bathroom counter. Not because she'd demanded it, but because I'd just kept making room without being asked, until there wasn't much left that felt entirely mine. A few days later, I dropped everything off at a storage unit we'd arranged through Brooke. I didn't see Nina. There was nothing left that needed to be said between us. The actions had already covered it. On the drive home, I replayed that original text again. "I'm not your property. Stop calling me." I'd spent weeks turning over whether I'd overreacted. Whether a reasonable person would have just unlocked the door, talked it through, turned it into a "we need to communicate better" conversation. But what I finally understood was this: that text wasn't about independence. It wasn't about needing space. It was about control without accountability. She wanted the freedom to disappear on her own terms while keeping the landing pad intact for when she decided to come back. She wanted to push someone away and still have them standing there. She wanted to reject connection without losing access. The structure she'd built worked exactly as long as I was willing to hold it up from the inside. The moment I stopped, no argument, no chase, no negotiating over what she meant versus what she said, it collapsed. Because it was never built on anything solid. It was built on my willingness to keep compensating, keep adjusting, keep making room. That structure was invisible while it was working. I didn't see myself propping it up. I thought I was just being a good partner, patient, reasonable. I told myself that's just how relationships are: you work through the hard parts, you give people the benefit of the doubt. All of that is true in a normal situation. But in this situation, what it actually meant was that I'd been doing the structural work for both of us and calling it love. The anger, the calls, Brooke, the email, the handwritten note, none of it was really about losing me. It was about losing a version of me she'd stopped having to earn. And when she realized that version wasn't coming back, there wasn't much else to do. I don't hate her. I don't think she's some villain. I think she got comfortable in a dynamic where she held all the exits, and I kept standing by the door, waiting to be let back in. I closed that door, not with anger, not with revenge, not with some final dramatic word, but with 2 sentences and a lock change. For the first time in a long time, I'm not sitting around waiting for someone to decide I'm worth choosing. I already made that call. How does one discern, in the quiet erosion of a relationship, the precise moment when patience transforms into a self-destructive concession?